Okay guys, I'm back here for another video, and I know reading the title of this video, maybe you guys would think it's a good idea to skip it because hey, it's just units, right? But no, this video is very important and it's gonna make your life a whole heck of a lot easier when you start to program in CSS. So let's get into it. So there are many different units out there in CSS, but I'm going to show you some of the most used units that you guys can abuse in your coding projects so that you guys don't have to use pixels all the time. So starting off with the first unit, you guys would probably know this already, and that would be pixels. So the first unit, pixels, which is mostly what we've been using already. When you want an image or an element to be 10 pixels, for example, that thing is going to be literally 10 pixels of your screen. So the benefit of using pixels is that it's exact, which means it's super easy to use. But the disadvantage of using pixels and pixels only is that not all screens are the same size. A 200 pixel image might look small on a computer, but those 200 pixels are going to be humongous on an iPhone, or like even an iPad, it's humongous. So yeah, that's pixels. So the next unit that we'll talk about is viewport. And what viewport is, it is a percentage of your screen. So for example, if you want an image to have a width of 50% of your website, then you would use 50 VW, with VW meaning viewport width. And if you wanted to change the height, you would use VH for viewport height. So you guys know how it goes. And a pro for this would be that using viewports are super easy. I think it's even easier than pixels, to be honest with you guys. But the disadvantage of using viewport is that it's even worse than pixel when you're coding a mobile version of your website, because viewport is made specifically for computers, so it would have a little bit of trouble actually fitting 100% of your mobile screen if you were to use viewport as your CSS code for mobile support. So yeah, that's what viewport is. And the last unit that we'll talk about is Rem, which personally for me is the go-to unit. Basically, one Rem is equivalent to around 16 pixels, but it can vary depending on the user's browser settings. And what I like about Rem is that it is like pixels, but it's a lot more friendly to the users of your website. So they could edit their font size on like Firefox or Google Chrome, and your website will reflect that set browser setting that they set. So it's a lot more friendly for users of your website, yeah. And what's also good about it is that it's the go-to unit when using mobile support for your website, which we'll go over in a future video, but just know that Rem is the best option when programming for support in websites and also like for phones. If you wanted to open up your website on Safari, for example, Rem is the go-to unit for that. And lastly, you don't have to use huge numbers like with pixels. So for example, if you wanted your div to be like 1,000 pixels, 1,000 is a big number, but instead of using like 1,000, you could use 50 Rem, for example, and it would be the same thing. Those numbers are a lot easier to look at when you're using Rem instead of using pixels. And it's a lot easier in your hand too. I think the one con for using Rem is that the ratio again is 1 Rem to 16 pixels, so it might be harder to wrap your head around it at first, but you guys will get used to it at the end. Okay, you guys, so I have this website pulled up here. It's a beautiful website, but the bad thing about it is that all of the CSS that's in here is using freaking pixels. And as you remember from earlier, using pixels alone probably isn't the best option. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to go to this body element and I'm going to change it the minimum height from 600 pixels to 100 VH. And by using 100 VH for the body, we'll make it so that it's 100% of the website. And basically what that does is the content that I have here will be exactly in the middle. And now what we want to do is, instead of having huge 100 pixel gaps, which is, yeah, it's huge, let's do 5 rem instead for the outer div. And then for the div inside the outer div, let's have a rem of 2 instead. Or not even 2, we can have a rem of like 1.5. And there we go. Look how easy it is for our eyes to see this. 300 pixels for a max width is kind of big as well. Let's change it to like 20 VW instead. There you go. Look how easy that is compared to like 300 pixels. 300 pixels just seems really big. Look how much better that is. So, okay, let's also change the border radius. Instead of having 16 pixels, let's make it 1 rem instead. And if you look at the border radius here, it's the exact same thing. As I've said, 1 rem is around 16 pixels. Instead of writing like 16px, we can write just 1 rem, and that's way easier for our eyes, and it's way easier for our hands too. And then finally, we can leave the padding as 20 pixels, but it's much better if we chose like 1.25 rems instead. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll catch you in the next one.